April 15, 1993, Medellin, Colombia. Captain Luis Moreno walked into the Hotel Intercontinental bar carrying a briefcase with $100,000 cash. His target sat alone at the corner table. Marcus Rivera, former DEA agent, now just another gringo trying to disappear. "Kill Sebastian Escobar," Moreno said, sliding the case across the table. "The Cali Cartel wants Pablo's son dead. You're the only one who can get close enough." Marcus stared at the money. 15 years ago, he'd made a promise to Pablo Escobar, a promise that saved his daughter's life. Now someone wanted to use that connection to destroy everything. What Marcus didn't know was that Pablo was already 3 moves ahead. The drug lord had received the same information 2 hours earlier. He knew about the money, he knew about the betrayal, and Pablo Escobar's next move would turn Medellin into a war zone. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Rivera's fingers hovered over the briefcase latches, the weight of Captain Moreno's stare pressing against his skull like a loaded gun. The Hotel Intercontinental's bar hummed with the quiet desperation of cocaine money and government corruption, a symphony he'd learned to tune out during his 15 years of voluntary exile in Medellin. "You're insane," Marcus finally said, pushing the case back across the mahogany table. "Sebastian Escobar isn't some street dealer you can disappear in the night." Moreno's weathered face cracked into a smile that never reached his eyes. "Which is exactly why they want you, gringo. Word is you have history with the family. Special access." The words hit Marcus like ice water. He kept his expression neutral, a skill that had kept him alive through 2 decades of dancing with devils in designer suits. But inside, alarm bells screamed. His connection to Pablo Escobar was buried deeper than the bodies in La Macarena cemetery. If Moreno knew about it, others did too. "I run a security company," Marcus said, taking a measured sip of his whiskey. "Corporate installations, bodyguard work for oil executives. Nothing more exciting than fixing broken alarm systems." "Rivera Security Solutions." Moreno nodded, pulling out a manila folder thick with photographs. "Very legitimate, very boring, except for this." The first photo made Marcus's blood freeze. It showed him shaking hands with Pablo Escobar outside a church in Envigado. December 1978, the night that changed everything. The night his 8-year-old daughter Sofia was returned to him unharmed, in exchange for information that led to the massacre of 37 people in a rival cartel compound. "Where did you get this?" Marcus's voice came out steady despite the earthquake in his chest. "Does it matter?" Moreno spread out more photos like playing cards in a poker game where the stakes were measured in body bags. "The Cali Cartel doesn't care about your past sins, Rivera. They care about your access. One job, $100,000, enough to disappear properly this time." Marcus studied the corrupt captain's face, searching for tells. In his DEA days, he'd learned to read the micro-expressions that separated truth from elaborate lies. Moreno believed what he was saying, but Marcus sensed layers beneath layers. Someone was pulling strings, and the puppet master remained hidden. "And if I refuse?" Then tomorrow morning, copies of these photos find their way to Pablo's lieutenants, along with a detailed report of how the former DEA agent Marcus Rivera has been living quietly in their backyard for 15 years. Moreno's smile widened. "I hear Escobar has creative methods for dealing with old betrayals." The threat hung in the air like cordite after gunfire. Marcus had seen Pablo's creativity firsthand. Car bombs that turned city blocks into crater-filled graveyards. Judges found dismembered in their own courtrooms. Entire families erased from existence for the sin of crossing the king of cocaine. 24 hours, Moreno said, standing and straightening his uniform jacket. "Think carefully, Rivera. The Cali Cartel pays well, but Pablo Escobar's memory is longer than his patience." Marcus watched the captain walk away, noting how other patrons suddenly found their drinks fascinating when Moreno passed their tables. Power and fear moved through the room like smoke, invisible but suffocating. Alone again, Marcus opened the briefcase. Neat stacks of American hundreds filled the interior, more money than his security business earned in 2 years. Blood money, the kind that bought silence and graves in equal measure. His cell phone buzzed against his hip. The caller ID showed only numbers, but Marcus recognized the pattern. A secure line he'd hoped never to use again. "You have something that belongs to us," the voice said without preamble. "Raúl Henao, one of Pablo's most trusted sicarios. The patron wants to see you. I don't know what you're talking about. The briefcase, Marcus. Close it and walk away. El Patron is waiting at the safe house in Poblado." 1 hour. The line went dead. Marcus felt sweat beading along his collar despite the bar's air conditioning. If Pablo knew about the money, he knew about the contract, which meant the drug lord was orchestrating something far more complex than a simple assassination attempt on his own son. Marcus snapped the briefcase shut and stood, leaving his whiskey unfinished. As he walked through the hotel lobby, he caught his reflection in the polished marble walls, a 58-year-old man who'd spent 15 years convincing himself that retirement meant redemption, that distance from the game meant absolution for the players left behind. But the game never ended in Medellin. It just waited, patient as a spider in its web, for the right moment to drag you back into the center of the maze. Outside, the April heat hit him like a physical blow. The streets pulsed with the controlled chaos of a city built on cocaine money and sustained by violence. Somewhere in this concrete jungle, Pablo Escobar was planning his next move, and somehow, impossibly, Marcus Rivera had become a piece on the board again. The taxi ride to Poblado would take 20 minutes through traffic that moved like blood through diseased arteries. 20 minutes to figure out why the most dangerous man in Colombia wanted to see a ghost from his past. 20 minutes before Marcus learned that some promises, once made, could never be broken, only escaped. The taxi's cracked vinyl seats stuck to Marcus's shirt as they crawled through Medellin's arterial streets. He pressed the briefcase against his knees, feeling the weight of 100,000 reasons to disappear forever. But disappearing was a luxury he'd forfeited 15 years ago when he chose to stay close to the only thing that mattered, Sofia. His daughter lived 12 blocks from his apartment in Laurels, close enough for Sunday dinners and far enough to maintain the illusion that his past couldn't touch her. She worked as a pediatric nurse at Hospital San Vicente, saving children's lives while her father carried the weight of the children he'd failed to save. The irony wasn't lost on him, redemption through proximity, as if her goodness could somehow balance his sins. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to her contact. "Mia, dinner Sunday?" He typed, then deleted the words. What would he say if this meeting with Pablo went sideways? How do you leave a goodbye message without admitting you're walking into hell? The taxi driver, a weathered man with cartel tattoos snaking up his forearms, caught Marcus's eyes in the rearview mirror. "You look like a man carrying heavy stones, amigo." Something like that. In this city, we all carry stones. The trick is knowing when to put them down. The driver's laugh was bitter as burnt coffee. Of course, some stones, they grow roots, become part of you. Marcus thought about December 1978, about 8-year-old Sofia crying in his arms after Pablo's men returned her. The relief had been so pure, so overwhelming, that he'd almost forgotten the price demanded. Almost. Until the news broke 2 days later, 37 bodies found in a bombed-out warehouse, including women and children who'd simply been in the wrong place when Marcus's intelligence led the death squads to their door. The guilt had carved itself into his bones, but it was Sofia's nightmares that nearly destroyed him. For months afterward, she'd wake screaming, calling for her papa to save her from the men in the shadows. She never spoke about what happened during those 3 days she was gone, and Marcus never asked. Some silences were more merciful than truth. Through the taxi's grimy window, he watched Medellin's schizophrenic landscape roll past. Gleaming office towers cast shadows over sprawling barrios where children played soccer between bullet holes and shrine candles. This city had raised him, broken him, and now seemed determined to reclaim him. He'd thought 15 years of legitimate work, installing security systems, training bodyguards for nervous executives, would be enough penance. But Medellin never forgot its debts. His phone buzzed. A text from Sofia. "Papa, can you pick up milk on your way home? Running late from hospital." Home. She still called his apartment home, even though she'd moved out 3 years ago to live with her fiancé, David. A good man, an architect who built schools instead of destroying them. Marcus had run a background check, of course, then felt ashamed for doubting his daughter's judgment. But in his world, trust was a luxury that got people killed. He typed back, "Of course, mija. Everything okay?" Long surgery. 7-year-old with internal bleeding. Touch and go. Marcus stared at the message, seeing his daughter's hands working to save a child the same age she'd been when the monsters came for her. The continuity was devastating and beautiful. Sophia healing the wounds the world kept carving into its smallest victims. Another text arrived. He made it through. "Going to be fine. Good. I'm proud of you. Love you, Papa." The words hit him like a physical blow. When was the last time he'd told her the whole truth about anything? About why they'd left the United States so suddenly when she was 8? About the real reason he'd quit the DEA? About the deal that saved her life but cost so many others? Sophia believed they'd moved to Colombia for his health after her mother's death, a convenient lie wrapped around a terrible truth. She thought her kidnapping was random. Wrong place, wrong time, quickly resolved through police intervention. She had no idea her father had traded blood for blood, that her freedom was purchased with other children's lives. The taxi lurched to a stop at a red light. Street vendors weaved between cars, selling cigarettes, fruit, and probably small bags of powder that kept this economy humming. A boy, maybe 10 years old, approached their window with packets of gum. His eyes held the premature wisdom of children who'd seen too much too early. Marcus bought 3 packets he didn't need and watched the boy disappear into traffic, another ghost in a city full of them. "Poblado," the driver announced as they turned into the wealthy district. "The safe house is near the park?" Marcus nodded, though he hadn't given the man a specific address. In Medellin, everyone knew everyone's business. It was survival currency. As they climbed toward Pablo's sanctuary, Marcus realized his greatest fear wasn't death. It was Sophia discovering the truth about the man who'd raised her. That her hero was just another devil who'd learned to smile. The safe house sat behind high walls topped with razor wire, its colonial facade a beautiful lie concealing the fortress within. Marcus paid the taxi driver, who refused to meet his eyes as he counted the bills. Even blood money spent the same as honest wages. The guards at the gate knew him instantly, which meant Pablo had been expecting this reunion longer than Marcus realized. They searched him with professional efficiency, removing his phone and wallet but leaving the briefcase untouched. Another message: Pablo wanted his props for this performance. Inside, the house breathed with quiet menace. Mahogany floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, while armed men in expensive suits positioned themselves like elegant scarecrows throughout the rooms. The decor screamed respectability: oil paintings of pastoral scenes, fresh orchids in Ming vases. But the smell of gun oil and fear cut through the imported cologne. "Marcus Rivera." The voice came from the shadows at the top of a marble staircase. 15 years, and you haven't aged a day. Guilt must agree with you. Pablo Escobar descended like a king greeting a wayward subject. At 44, he'd grown thicker around the middle, his famous mustache now streaked with silver, but his eyes retained the cold intelligence that had built an empire from powder and bullets. He wore a simple white guayabera and dark slacks, the uniform of a man who no longer needed to advertise his power. "Don Pablo." Marcus inclined his head slightly, the same gesture of respect he offered 15 years ago when begging for his daughter's life. "You look well. Prison food disagreed with me, but freedom has its remedies." Pablo's smile was warm as a razor blade. "You brought something for me?" Marcus set the briefcase on a coffee table between them. Pablo opened it with the casual interest of a man examining his morning newspaper, then closed it without counting. 100,000 from our friends in Cali. They think very highly of your skills." Pablo settled into a leather chair that probably cost more than most Colombians earned in a lifetime. "Tell me, what did Captain Moreno promise you?" "That you'd kill me if I refused." Accurate, but incomplete. Pablo poured himself a cognac from a crystal decanter. "Would you like a drink? I remember you favored whiskey. I remember you favored cutting off fingers before asking questions." Pablo's laugh was genuinely delighted. "You see? This is why I always liked you, Marcus. Most men either grovel or posture when they sit in that chair. You simply tell the truth." His expression hardened. Even when the truth is ugly, a door opened somewhere in the house. Footsteps approached across the marble floor, lighter than the guard's heavy boots, but purposeful. Marcus turned toward the sound and felt his world tilt off its axis. Sophia walked into the room. His daughter moved with the same confident stride he remembered from childhood, but everything else had changed. Gone was the soft nurse's uniform, replaced by tailored black pants and a silk blouse that spoke of money Marcus knew she didn't have. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes, his wife's eyes, held a coldness he'd never seen there before. "Hello, Papa." The word came out like a curse. Marcus felt the briefcase slip from his numb fingers, heard it hit the floor with a sound like breaking bones. His mouth opened, but no words came. This was impossible. Sophia was at the hospital, saving children, living the clean life he'd built for her on a foundation of other people's blood. "You look surprised," she continued, moving to stand beside Pablo's chair with an intimacy that made Marcus's stomach turn to ice. "Didn't you always teach me to expect the unexpected?" Pablo raised his glass in a mock toast. "Sophia has been working with us for quite some time now. Brilliant girl. She discovered Captain Moreno's little scheme weeks ago and suggested we adjust the parameters." Marcus found his voice, though it came out as a croak. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" "Learning the truth about my father." She pulled a manila envelope from her purse and tossed it onto the table beside the briefcase. Photographs spilled out. The same images Moreno had shown him, plus others Marcus had never seen. Pictures of the warehouse massacre. Crime scene photos of the 37 bodies, including 3 children no older than Sophia had been. "December 22nd, 1978, she said, her voice clinically calm. "The night you traded my freedom for 37 lives. Did you think I'd never find out? Did you think your lies would protect me forever?" The room spun around Marcus like a carnival ride operated by the damned. Everything he'd built, every careful lie, every protective barrier, all of it crumbling in the space between one heartbeat and the next. His daughter knew, had always known, and the knowing had carved her into something he didn't recognize. "Sophia," he whispered. "I saved you." "No, Papa." Her smile was Pablo's smile, cold and certain. "You damned us both." Marcus lunged forward, reaching for his daughter as if he could somehow pull her back from the precipice she'd already leaped from. "Sophia, no, you don't understand." "Sit down, Papa." Her voice carried Pablo's authority now, and Marcus found himself obeying before conscious thought could intervene. "You're going to listen. For once in my life, you're going to hear the truth instead of feeding me lies wrapped in good intentions." Pablo leaned back in his chair, savoring the performance. His fingers drummed against the crystal tumbler, a rhythm Marcus recognized from nightmares. The same beat Pablo had tapped against the table 15 years ago while negotiating the price of Sophia's freedom. "I was 8 years old," Sophia continued, pacing now like a prosecutor before a jury. "But I wasn't stupid. I knew what those men wanted from you. I knew why they kept asking about your work, about names, about places." She stopped directly in front of him. "I knew you gave them everything they asked for." Marcus's hands trembled as memories he'd spent decades burying clawed their way to the surface. Sophia's tear-streaked face when they brought her back, the way she'd flinched from his touch for months afterward, the nightmares that made her scream his name in the dark. "They showed me the newspapers afterward," she said. "Pictures of the bodies. Made sure I understood what my rescue cost. They wanted me to remember who was responsible." "They were animals," Marcus whispered. "I had no choice." "There's always a choice." Sophia's voice cracked, revealing the frightened child beneath the hardened exterior. "You chose me over 37 strangers. You chose your comfort over justice. You chose to lie for 15 years rather than trust me with the truth." Pablo set down his glass with deliberate care. "The girl has been quite resourceful. When she approached us 6 months ago, I thought it was coincidence. A nurse treating one of my wounded soldiers, asking innocent questions about old operations. But Sophia is her father's daughter. She knows how to extract information." Marcus felt ice crystallizing in his veins. 6 months? "The hospital works with all the cartels, Papa. Bullets don't discriminate by employer." Sophia's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. You'd be amazed what dying men confess when they think they're seeing an angel of mercy. You've been planning this. Marcus looked between his daughter and the drug lord who destroyed so many families. All of it. Moreno, the contract, bringing me here. The captain thought he was running his own game, Pablo confirmed. Selling information to Cali, skimming profits, playing all sides. He had no idea Sophia was feeding him intelligence, steering him toward this moment. His laugh was genuinely appreciative. The girl inherited your talent for manipulation. Marcus's phone buzzed from where the guards had placed it on the side table. The sound cut through the room like a gunshot. Sophia glanced at the screen, and her composure cracked for just an instant. David's looking for you, Marcus said, reading her micro-expression. Your fiancé. Does he know what you've become? David knows what he needs to know. But Sophia's voice carried the first uncertainty Marcus had heard since she walked into this nightmare. This isn't about him, isn't it? Marcus stood slowly, testing whether Pablo's men would stop him. They remained motionless, waiting for orders. You're going to destroy everything good in your life for revenge, just like I did. I'm finishing what you started. Sophia's mask slipped further, revealing glimpses of the daughter he remembered. Those families deserved justice. The children who died because of your information deserved better than silence. And you think working with Pablo gives them that? Marcus gestured toward the drug lord. He's killed more children than cancer. You're not seeking justice, mija. You're perpetuating the cycle. Pablo's expression darkened. Careful, old friend. My patience has limits. But Marcus was beyond caution now. His daughter was drowning in the same blood that had stained his hands for decades, and he could see her fighting the current even as she claimed to be swimming with it. What's the real plan, Sophia? What happens after you've had your revenge? She turned away, but not before he caught the flash of fear in her eyes. Justice. Whose justice? Marcus pressed. Yours? Pablo's? Or the families you claim to represent? The silence stretched between them like a bridge over an abyss. Outside, Medellin pulsed with its eternal rhythms of violence and survival. But inside this room, 3 broken people sat surrounded by the wreckage of choices that could never be undone. Sophia's phone buzzed now. Then again. David calling, probably wondering why his fiancée wasn't answering. Marcus watched his daughter stare at the screen, and for a moment, she was 8 years old again, torn between worlds she couldn't reconcile. Pablo cleared his throat, reminding them all who held the power here. Shall we discuss the terms of your continued existence, Marcus? Sophia has some interesting proposals. Marcus felt the walls of the room pressing inward as Pablo's words settled over them like a burial shroud. Sophia's fingers hovered over her phone's screen, David's name flashing with desperate persistence. Each unanswered ring seemed to strip away another layer of the life she'd built, revealing something raw and vengeful beneath. The terms are simple, Sophia said, finally declining the call. Her voice steadied as she slipped back into the cold persona she'd constructed. You're going to help us eliminate the Cali leadership. All of them. Marcus stared at his daughter, seeing now how completely she'd been consumed by the same darkness that had claimed him decades ago. Sophia, listen to yourself. You're talking about mass murder. I'm talking about justice. She moved to the window, gazing out at the city sprawling below them. The families of those 37 victims. Do you know what happened to them, Papa? Do you know how they survived after you took their fathers, their mothers, their children? Marcus remained silent, but his silence was answer enough. Maria Gonzalez was 6 when you killed her parents, Sophia continued, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. She lived on the streets for 3 years before tuberculosis took her. Carlos Mendoza's widow sold her body to feed her remaining children. 2 of them died of malnutrition before they turned 10. Each name hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd never allowed himself to investigate the aftermath, never let himself count the secondary casualties of his choice. The willful ignorance had been its own kind of mercy. Sophia, how do you know all this? She turned from the window, and her eyes held depths of pain he'd never imagined. Because I visited them, every family, every survivor. I told them who I was, who you were, what really happened that night. The room tilted again, gravity shifting in ways that made Marcus's chest tight. "You told them?" "I told them everything." Sophia's voice carried the weight of confession and condemnation. "Their grief became my grief, Papa. Their rage became my purpose." Pablo's phone rang, an old-fashioned rotary tone that seemed to mock the modern hell they'd constructed. He answered with casual authority, speaking in rapid Spanish about shipments and territories. Business as usual in the empire of powder and blood. Marcus watched his daughter during Pablo's conversation, searching for traces of the child who'd once made him breakfast in bed on Father's Day, who'd cried when she accidentally stepped on a butterfly. But those memories felt like artifacts from someone else's life. "The Cali Cartel has been systematically hunting down the remaining family members," Sophia said once Pablo ended his call. "Loose ends, they call them. Witnesses to old business. 3 more died last month. An old woman who lost her grandson, 2 brothers who survived the warehouse. And you think revenge will stop it? I think power is the only language these animals understand." Sophia pulled another photograph from her envelope. A young woman's corpse, throat cut, eyes staring at nothing. This was Isabella Vargas, 17 years old. Her father died in your warehouse. The Cali soldiers found her working at a textile factory in Bogotá. Marcus recognized the executioner's technique. Clean, efficient, designed to send a message. The same methods he'd once cataloged in DEA reports, back when he believed justice wore a badge and followed rules. "How many more have to die before you understand?" Sophia's composure finally cracked completely, tears streaming down her face even as her voice remained steady. "Your silence didn't protect anyone. It just made the killing quieter." Pablo finished his cognac and stood, smoothing his guayabera with the satisfied air of a man whose plans were proceeding perfectly. "The beautiful thing about family, Marcus, is how it binds us to our worst choices. Sophia understands this now." Marcus felt something fundamental shifting inside him, like tectonic plates grinding against each other before an earthquake. His daughter wasn't just seeking revenge, she was seeking absolution. For him, for herself, for the ghosts that haunted them both. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Use what you know," Pablo said. "Your DEA contacts, your security clients, your knowledge of Cali's operations. Help us end this war definitively." "And if I refuse?" Sophia answered before Pablo could speak. "Then David dies first. Then every client you've ever protected. Then everyone who's ever mattered to you." Her tears had stopped, leaving only the terrible clarity of someone who'd abandoned hope. "I learned efficiency from watching you, Papa. No wasted motion, no unnecessary suffering." Marcus closed his eyes and saw his daughter at 8 years old, asking him to read her the same bedtime story for the 100th time. The memory felt like a knife twisting in his chest, beautiful and excruciating. When he opened his eyes, Sophia was holding a gun, a small silver automatic that caught the chandelier light like a promise of violence. "Choose quickly," she whispered. "The city's burning, and we're running out of time to control the fire." Marcus stared at the gun in his daughter's hand and felt something click into place. Not acceptance, but recognition. The silver automatic was a Walther PPK, .32 caliber. Standard DEA issue from the early 80s. His old service weapon, the one that had supposedly been lost in the bureaucratic shuffle when he resigned. "Where did you get that gun, Sophia?" She blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "What does it matter?" "It matters because I filed a report 15 years ago claiming that weapon was stolen from my apartment." Marcus kept his voice steady, though his mind raced through implications that made his blood turn cold. "I filed that report the day after I made my deal with Pablo." Pablo's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the first crack in his theatrical composure. "Marcus, what are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything." Marcus stood slowly, ignoring the guards who tensed around the room's perimeter. "I'm remembering. That gun disappeared the same night Sophia was returned to me. The same night I gave you the warehouse location." Sophia's grip on the weapon wavered. "Papa, you're not making sense." "Aren't I?" Marcus felt pieces of a 15-year-old puzzle falling into their proper places, creating a picture that made him sick. "Tell me, mija, how exactly did Pablo's men find you that night? How did they know where Cali was holding you?" The silence that followed was deafening. Pablo's fingers stopped their rhythmic drumming. Sofia's breathing became shallow and quick. Outside, the eternal sounds of Medellin continued. Traffic, voices, life proceeding, while truth carved its way through carefully constructed lies. "I tracked them down," Sofia said, but her voice lacked conviction now. "I investigated—" "You were 8 years old when they took you," Marcus interrupted. "But you weren't taken randomly, were you? And you weren't rescued by chance." Pablo's laugh came out forced, theatrical. "You're being paranoid, old friend." "Am I?" Marcus turned to face the drug lord directly. "You needed information about Callie's operations. You needed someone with DEA access. But you also needed leverage, something to ensure cooperation." His gaze shifted to Sofia and the gun that trembled in her hands. "So you arranged for Callie to take my daughter. Then you arranged to rescue her. And I was so grateful, so broken by fear, that I gave you everything you wanted." Sofia's face had gone pale. "That's not— You're wrong." "The warehouse massacre happened 3 days later," Marcus continued, each word feeling like glass in his throat. 37 people died because I gave Pablo their location. But those weren't random victims, were they? They were Cali soldiers and informants, the same network that had supposedly ordered your kidnapping. Pablo's mask finally slipped completely. The warm paternalism vanished, replaced by the cold calculation that had built his empire. "You always were too clever for your own good, Marcus." Sofia lowered the gun, her entire body shaking. No, you're both lying. I was kidnapped. I remember—" "You remember what we needed you to remember," Pablo said with casual cruelty. A frightened child, traumatized by captivity, rescued by her father's sacrifice, the perfect motivation for a lifetime of guilt and manipulation. The revelation hit Sofia like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, the Walther clattering to the marble floor. "But the families, the victims, I spoke to them. They confirmed what happened at the warehouse," Marcus said, his heart breaking as he watched his daughter's world collapse. "But not why it happened, not who orchestrated it." Pablo moved toward the fallen weapon with predatory grace. "The families were real, Sofia. Their grief was real. Your father's choices killed their loved ones. That part was never a lie. We simply provided context." Sofia looked between them, understanding dawning like a slow sunrise over a battlefield. "You used me, both of you. You turned my entire life into a lie." "I saved your life," Marcus said desperately. "Whatever else happened, my life was never in danger." Sofia's voice cracked with 15 years of misdirected rage. It was all performance. Theater to make you compliant. Pablo retrieved the gun, checking its chamber with professional efficiency. The girl served her purpose admirably. Though I must admit, I didn't expect her to develop such initiative. Marcus felt the final pieces falling into place, creating a picture of manipulation so complete it took his breath away. The hospital. Her job there. You've been watching her, controlling her, feeding her information for years. Sofia has always been an asset, Pablo confirmed, though she believed she was acting independently. Free will is such a comforting illusion. Sofia's laughter came out broken, hysterical. "I wanted justice. I wanted to honor the dead. I wanted to make you pay for your sins." She looked at her father with eyes full of terrible clarity. "But I was just another puppet in your game." Pablo's arrogance finally revealed itself completely in a single dismissive sentence. "Family love makes people so beautifully predictable." The words hung in the air like a condemnation, exposing the emotional void at the heart of his manipulation. In that moment, Marcus saw that Pablo understood power and fear, but had never comprehended the true nature of love, and that blindness would be his weakness. Marcus felt something fundamental shift in the room's dynamics as Pablo's words echoed between them. The drug lord's dismissal of family love as mere predictability revealed the crucial flaw in his elaborate manipulation. He'd underestimated the very force he'd tried to weaponize. Sofia stood frozen, her world rewritten in the span of minutes. But Marcus recognized something in her posture, the way she held herself despite the devastating revelations. She was his daughter, and beneath the manufactured rage and orchestrated pain, the core of who she was remained untouched by Pablo's manipulation. "You're wrong," Marcus said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Love isn't predictable, it's transformative." Pablo's smile faltered slightly. "Marcus, surely you're not going to attempt some dramatic gesture?" "No dramatics needed." Marcus moved slowly towards Sophia, ignoring the guards who shifted nervously around the room's perimeter. "Just truth, the one thing you've never been able to manufacture or control." Sophia's eyes tracked his movement, confusion and hurt warring across her features. "Papa, I don't understand what's happening anymore." "You understand more than you think, mija." Marcus stopped just out of arm's reach, respecting the chasm that 15 years of lies had carved between them. "Tell me about David." The unexpected question made Sophia blink rapidly. "What about him?" "You love him." It wasn't a question. Marcus had seen the way her composure cracked every time her fiancé's calls went unanswered. Real love. Not the manufactured kind Pablo thinks he understands. The kind that makes you want to be better than you are. Pablo's jaw tightened imperceptibly. This wasn't following his script. "David doesn't know what I'm doing," Sophia whispered. "He thinks I'm working late shifts at the hospital. He's planning our wedding, choosing flowers, talking about children." Her voice broke on the last word. "Because he loves the real you," Marcus said. "Not the weapon Pablo tried to forge. Not the instrument of revenge I accidentally created. The woman who chose to become a nurse because she wanted to heal people." Sophia's breathing became ragged. "I told myself I was honoring the dead, making things right, by working with the man who killed them." Marcus felt the terrible irony settling over them like ash. "Pablo didn't just manipulate your kidnapping, Sophia. He ordered those warehouse deaths. Every family you met, every survivor you promised justice, their pain exists because of him." Pablo's fingers tightened on the Walther, his theatrical composure finally showing genuine cracks. "Enough of this sentimental nonsense." "Is it nonsense?" Marcus turned to face him directly, feeling pieces of a larger plan crystallizing in his mind. "You built your entire strategy around controlling love, but you've never felt it yourself. That's why you can't see what's really happening here. And what exactly do you think is happening?" Marcus smiled for the first time since entering this nightmare. "You're about to learn the difference between manipulation and transformation." Sophia's phone buzzed again on the side table. David's name flashing persistently, a lifeline to the world she'd built beyond revenge and violence. This time, instead of declining the call, she moved toward the phone with sudden purpose. "Don't touch that," Pablo commanded, raising the gun. "Shoot me then," Sophia said, her voice steadying with each word. "But I'm done being your asset. I'm done being anyone's weapon." The guards moved closer, but Pablo held up a restraining hand. His control was slipping, and everyone in the room could feel it. "You think love conquers all, Marcus?" Pablo's laugh carried a razor edge of desperation. "Your daughter spent 15 years hating you, planning this moment, wanting you dead. And yet she can't go through with it," Marcus observed. "Because underneath everything you built, she's still the child who used to make me breakfast on Father's Day. Still the teenager who cried when she accidentally stepped on a butterfly. Still the woman who chose healing over hurting." Sophia picked up her phone, David's contact information glowing like a promise of redemption. Her thumb hovered over the answer button. "If you take that call," Pablo said coldly, "David dies within the hour." Sophia's hand trembled, but she didn't lower the phone. "Then you'll have to kill me first, because I'm not letting you destroy anything else I love." Marcus felt pride surge through him, not for the revenge-seeking daughter Pablo had tried to create, but for the woman who was choosing love over vengeance even at the cost of her own life. "Sophia," he said softly, "whatever happens next, I want you to know, every choice I made, every terrible thing I did was worth it, because it kept you alive to become who you really are." She looked at him with tears streaming down her face, and for the first time in 15 years, he saw his daughter clearly, not through the lens of guilt or manipulation, but simply as herself. Pablo raised the gun, his empire of control crumbling around him. "Family love," he snarled. "So beautifully predictable." Sophia answered David's call. "David?" Sophia's voice cracked as she spoke into the phone, her eyes never leaving Pablo's gun. "I need you to listen carefully. Sophia, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Are you—" "I love you," she interrupted, the words carrying weight that made Pablo's face contort with rage. "Whatever happens, remember that everything good in my life started the day I met you." Marcus watched his daughter transform in real time, 15 years of manufactured hatred dissolving as she chose her future over Pablo's orchestrated past. The drug lord's fatal miscalculation was becoming clear. He'd built his manipulation on the assumption that damaged people stayed broken, that love could only be corrupted, never renewed. "Sophia, you're scaring me." David's voice carried clearly in the silent room. "Where are you?" Pablo stepped forward, pressing the gun against Sophia's temple. "End the call, now." "I'm with my father," Sophia said calmly, her free hand reaching out to Marcus. When their fingers touched, 15 years of distance collapsed into nothing. "And I'm finally understanding what it means to choose forgiveness over revenge." Marcus felt the moment when their relationship shifted permanently. Not back to what it had been, but forward to what it could become. Pablo had tried to weaponize their love, but love, unlike violence, created rather than destroyed. It built bridges across the chasms that hatred carved. "The warehouse," Marcus said suddenly, pieces of a final revelation clicking into place. "Pablo, you didn't just use my information to massacre those families. You recorded it. You have evidence of my betrayal." Pablo's smile returned, predatory and cold. "Insurance is always wise in this business. But insurance only works if you're alive to use it." Marcus moved closer, calculating distances and angles with the tactical awareness that 20 years in law enforcement had burned into his reflexes. "And your arrogance just gave me something more valuable than insurance." "What's that, old friend?" "Certainty." Marcus launched himself forward as Sophia dropped to the floor, the phone skittering across marble as David's panicked voice called her name. The gun went off, deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. Marcus felt the bullet tear through his shoulder, spinning him sideways into Pablo's chest. They crashed into the antique desk together, papers and crystal flying as they grappled for the weapon. Pablo was smaller but desperate, fighting with the fury of a man watching his empire crumble. Marcus was older but driven by 15 years of guilt transformed into purpose. The Walther clattered across the floor toward the room's shadows. "Kill them both!" Pablo screamed at his guards, but Sophia was already moving. She snatched a heavy crystal paperweight from the scattered desk contents and hurled it at the nearest gunman's head with surgical precision. The man dropped like a stone, his weapon sliding under an antique armoire. Her years in trauma surgery had given her steady hands and knowledge of exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage. The second guard raised his rifle, but Marcus rolled Pablo between them as a shield. "Shoot through me," Pablo gasped, blood streaming from his nose where Marcus's elbow had connected. "Do it!" The guard hesitated, a moment of human uncertainty that Pablo's empire couldn't survive. Marcus used the pause to drive his knee into Pablo's ribs, feeling something crack as the drug lord doubled over in pain. "The recordings," Marcus demanded, maintaining his grip on Pablo's throat. "Where are they?" "Hidden, safe, you'll never—" Pablo's words came in strangled gasps. "I don't need to find them," Marcus realized, "because you're going to destroy them yourself." Pablo's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Marcus was offering him a deal. Not the manufactured transaction that had started this nightmare, but a genuine exchange between two men who'd finally abandoned their illusions. "Your empire is finished," Marcus continued, his voice deadly quiet. "The Cali Cartel knows you're here. My old DEA contacts are already moving on your safe houses. But you can choose how this ends, as a victim of your own arrogance, or as a man who finally did one decent thing." Sophia appeared at Marcus's shoulder, her face streaked with tears but her voice steady. "David's calling the police. Real police, not the ones you've bought. They'll be here in minutes." Pablo looked between father and daughter, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. They weren't the broken, manipulable victims he'd expected. They were healers who'd chosen to stop the cycle of violence his greed had perpetuated. In the distance, sirens began to wail, not the hollow sound of corruption, but the genuine promise of justice finally arriving in a city that had waited too long for redemption. Pablo closed his eyes and made his choice. Pablo's choice came in the form of a whispered location, coordinates that led Colombian authorities to a hidden vault containing 15 years of recorded conversations, photographic evidence, and financial records that implicated half the city's power structure in his web of corruption. The final recording was his own voice, confessing to orchestrating Sofia's kidnapping and the warehouse massacre that followed. He died 3 days later in custody, officially from injuries sustained during his arrest. Unofficially, the families of his victims had finally found their justice through channels that existed beyond any courthouse. 6 months later, Marcus sat in the small cafe near Medellin's hospital district, where Sofia worked her trauma surgery rotations. The same corner booth where he'd once met informants now hosted a different kind of conversation entirely. His left shoulder ached in the morning rain. Would always ache, the doctors said, but the weight that had pressed against his chest for 15 years was gone. The Ramirez family sent another card, Sofia said, sliding a handwritten note across the scarred wooden table. Their daughter graduated medical school. She wants to work in trauma surgery. Marcus opened the card carefully. Inside, a young woman's photo smiled back at him. She had her father's eyes, the same father whose death in Pablo's warehouse had haunted Marcus's dreams for 15 years. Below the photo, elegant script read, "Thank you for helping us understand that truth, however painful, heals better than silence." She looks like him, Marcus said quietly. She does. Sofia's hand covered his briefly. He would have been proud. These meetings had become routine, coffee every Thursday morning, sharing updates about the families they'd both wronged and the slow process of making amends. Not forgiveness, exactly. Some wounds were too deep for that, but acknowledgement, understanding, the kind of peace that came from finally telling the truth. Sofia wore a simple gold band now. She and David had married in a ceremony so small it barely qualified as more than a promise spoken in front of 3 witnesses. No reception, no celebration. Just 2 people choosing to build something clean and honest from the wreckage of their shared past. "David says I talk in my sleep sometimes," she mentioned, stirring sugar into her coffee with the same precise movements she used in surgery. Old memories surfacing, the real ones, not the manufactured versions Pablo planted. What kind of memories? You teaching me to ride a bicycle, the way you sang off-key lullabies when I was sick, how you cried the day I started kindergarten. Her smile carried sadness, but also something lighter, recognition of love that had survived years of burial. The man I spent 15 years hating never actually existed. Marcus nodded, understanding. His own memories had been returning in fragments, moments of genuine joy that Pablo's manipulation had tainted but not destroyed. Sofia's first word, her kindergarten graduation, the night she'd announced her acceptance to medical school, her face glowing with purpose. "I started therapy," he said. It was something he'd never imagined admitting, especially not to her. Group sessions for law enforcement officers who've lost their way. Turns out guilt makes people surprisingly honest. Dr. Martinez runs those sessions, doesn't she? She operated on your shoulder. Small city. Marcus smiled. She says healing requires facing what broke us in the first place, not fixing it. Some things can't be fixed, but acknowledging it, learning to carry it without letting it carry us. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Medellin wake up beyond the cafe's rain-streaked windows. The city looked the same, colonial buildings weathering another morning, vendors setting up their stalls, children walking to school, but felt fundamentally different, cleaner somehow, as if Pablo's death had lifted a shadow that had lingered too long over everyone. "I have something for you," Sofia said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small wrapped package, placing it carefully on the table between them. An early birthday present. Marcus unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a photograph he'd thought lost forever. Sofia at age 8, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a Father's Day card she'd made from construction paper and glitter. On the back, in her careful child's handwriting, "For the best papa in the world." "I found it in my apartment," she said. hidden behind some medical textbooks. I must have kept it all these years without realizing. Marcus felt tears threatening, not the bitter tears of guilt he'd grown accustomed to, but something warmer. The kind of tears that acknowledged loss while celebrating what remained. She was beautiful, he said, touching the photograph gently. She was loved, Sophia corrected, despite everything that happened after, despite all the years we lost. That little girl was loved completely, and nothing Pablo did could change that. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the cafe windows with the persistence of memory. But inside, a father and daughter who'd found their way back to each other sat quietly, finally understanding that some stories end not with redemption, but with recognition, the simple acknowledgement that love, however damaged, however complicated by history and hurt, endures. In the distance, church bells marked the hour, their bronze voices carrying across a city that had learned, like them, to find grace in the space between what was lost and what remained possible.